Acts 24 to 26. Well, these events all take place in the coastal town of Caesarea. Again, Paul is in prison there at this point, and he is going to be, during these three chapters, giving a defense of why he is not guilty of the Roman charge of treason. Of course, this is coming from Jews. So let's just talk through these narratives. The important people that we'll start with are Felix. He's the governor, living in Caesarea, in charge of keeping Israel or Palestine under wraps for Rome. So he'll represent Rome. And then let's talk about these individuals as they participate in the trials here of Paul. 24 begins with the first official Roman trial that Paul goes through. And actually, the Jews hire a man named Tertullus, possibly a Roman. But he brings the charge. Ananias, the high priest, coming down from Jerusalem, is also in attendance, and he is going to make his statement for the Jews against Paul in front of Felix. Here is the charge, 24 verses 5 and 6. We have found this man a plague, Paul, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout all the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even, and remember this magic word, tried to profane the temple, which was, of course, bringing a Gentile into the precincts. Now, what's ironic is that Felix has no nice feelings toward the Jews. So Ananias is there to give some credence to these charges, but it may even work against him or against the Jews on this level. A ringleader of a dangerous sect. Now, that is a death sentence in Roman thinking, so that's a serious charge. So Felix then gestures to Paul, go ahead and give your defense. And what Paul does is basically stay within the last 12 days of his life. He does not go into any past history, probably wisely. And he point for point makes the case that none of this actually happened. He has not been a plague to the world. He has not profaned the temple. And frankly, it's his word against theirs. And in fact, he does confess something. 24:14, but I confess to you that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. In other words, I'm just an old-fashioned Jew. I'm doing my duty as one of them, and what you're hearing is their complaint, not about me being in any way treasonous, but simply they disagree with my theology. Well, Felix does not make a judgment, but what he does, he wants to appease the Jews. He wants to also appease Rome. So instead of just letting Paul go, he leaves him in custody there in Caesarea for 2 years. Now, he does make his imprisonment rather light. It sounds like he can have visitors coming and going. So he is not he's in chains, but he's not in serious physical harm at this point. Well, Festus replaces Felix in 61 or in 59. So now this will be, again, a Roman governor in charge, and Felix has handed Paul off, as it were, to this new Roman governor. And when Festus reopens Paul's legal case, he asks Paul, Festus does, do you want to go back to Jerusalem to face charges there? He knows he's been in prison for 2 years. And so he says, do you want to go back to Jerusalem? And Paul wisely says no. I think he knows that he would not get a fair trial. So what Paul does is he says, I appeal to Nero, or the Caesar. And he's been emperor since 54. Well, this introduces into the story King Agrippa. He is the half-Jew. He is the last in the line of the Agrippa family. He is the son of Agrippa, who died in Acts 12. He is the grandson of the Agrippa that tried Jesus, and he's the great-grandson of Herod the Great, who actually built Caesarea. He comes into town, again, at the recommendation of Festus, because Paul has appealed to Caesar. So in a pre-trial hearing kind of a situation in chapter 26, both Festus and King Agrippa hear out Paul and what he wants to say. Then really he's preparing for his trip to Rome. It's a rehearsal for the trip to Rome. And then what we have in chapter 26 is by now a well-rehearsed story, again, of Paul's Damascus Road conversion. 27 or chapter 26, verses 17 and 18 end up his description of it. It's a little different from the other two. I will deliver you from the Jewish people, Jesus told Paul, as well as from the Gentiles, to whom I now send you, to open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins. Again, those are key words for ritual purification, and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Again, a nice long way of saying, I will make Gentiles able to be pure and thus able to enjoy the inheritance or resurrection that the Jewish family enjoys. As we come to the end of Paul's, again, pre-trial hearing in front of Festus and Agrippa, he says this, For these reasons the Jews seized me in the temple, and they tried to kill me. I have said no other things than that which the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Messiah would suffer, that he would be the first to rise from the dead, and would proclaim light to the Jewish people and the Gentiles. So this is the last sermon of Paul in Acts. I think Luke ties ends together there by putting together some ideas, of course, that Paul said. But now, as we read Luke, or we end the book of Acts, we really get a feel again for what Paul is claiming. The issue that is driving this whole angst of the Jew is resurrection. That he would find that the Messiah would be the first among everyone else who follows the Messiah to resurrect. So we get this back in 23:6, 24:15, and 21. 25:19 and 26:6. 5 times he says over these last couple chapters that we've read, the real issue here is resurrection. Well, Festus seems to be about ready to say, or even Agrippa, they're both saying, you know what, he is not worthy of death. And Festus even turns to Agrippa and says, you know what, if he had not appealed to Caesar, I would have let him go. But they both agree now that it is Paul's time to go to Rome. And so now, starting our next reading, he will get on a boat and head west.